All right, hey, everybody. Can you hear me all right? I'm excited to do this one today. Quick little intro. Jeff's just checking in. I'm figuring out my daughter's earbud because somebody stole my other earbud, so I got this cool little blue one on right now. But shout out to all of our listeners actually in Texas. We got a bunch. So for those of you guys in Texas that are under the snow, this is an all Canadian interview, so we have no sympathy. With the exception of like not having heat in your house, but that's like to whatever. You guys are tough. You guys can figure it out. I feel like Texans should just be able to go in their backyard and dig in the dirt and get oil and burn oil. I don't know if that might be a little outdated thinking, but that's where I'm. Just a big shout out to everybody and hope everybody's doing okay. I know it's a bit of a unique time down there. And so I hope everybody's okay. So a couple little tidbits before we bring Geoff on here. These if you're catching me live, which isn't always the case at this hour, but whenever you're listening to this, whether it's on the podcast or on YouTube or on Facebook, do me a huge favor, just hit the like button, leave a comment. Just let me know you're checking in, and that'd be great because it really helps the algorithm, this whole Facebook internet algorithm stuff. So I feel like we're now openly talking about the algorithm. It's like, please help, click something, and then the word gets out. So we're that'd be really helpful. So for those of you guys that haven't yet, please head on over to athletespecific.com and you can get out the automatic negative downloads. Also check out Mental Performance School, which is we've been a little bit delayed here, but Mental Performance School is going to be the new kind of online mental performance coaching program, a little bit of a watered down version of my more high end athlete breakthrough blueprint program, which is pretty pricey for a lot of people. I get it. So Mental Performance School is going to be a solid 8-week program with office hours and all sorts of good stuff to check in, and really, really excited about launching that. So with a little bit of an introduction, I'll just bring Geoff on here. If Geoff, you're ready, give me a thumbs up, Geoff, that you're like all clothed and we're not, I've got my pants on. I don't know about Geoff, but it's in this day and age of Zoom calls, we're a little bit worried about what we're wearing, like below the midsection. But quick little introduction for Geoff. Like, I met Geoff a couple years ago when he was the baseball coach at the University of Calgary, which is ridiculous because having any sort of spring sport in Calgary, in Canada, is just a recipe for disaster. But he had a great bunch of guys up there. We did a little talk on mental performance training for baseball guys. Was well received. I loved your catcher, by the way. But Geoff also now Geoff is an associate scout with the Baltimore Orioles, which is kind of a big deal, and also runs a rather niche website in the world of baseball, which is sidearm pitching. So sidearmnation.com, and I'll be throwing up some links here as we go. But we're going to talk a little bit about today. Well, as a scout, what derails athletes from actually making it to the ultimate level. A lot of my families that I work with start off with young athletes and think like, when should we get serious about this? And my response always that is like, now, because the sooner you understand these things, the better prepared you are. But just really excited to bring Geoff on here. So we'll just, without further ado, Geoff, here you go. There he is.
Hey, all right. How are you doing?
The last time I saw you was at like a garden center randomly, which was pretty cool a couple of years ago. But thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing this. This is good. This is good stuff. So listen, Geoff, I gave you a quick little intro. Do you want to give yourself a little bit? Do you want to fill in the gaps? Anything I missed there? But go right ahead. Toot your own horn.
Yeah, I grew up in Calgary and was fortunate enough to play 5 years of pro baseball. Especially being from Calgary, it's not exactly baseball weather, but baseball's always been my main passion. And being left-handed as a pitcher kind of stood out a little bit growing up. And I played lots of different sports too, though. My goal ultimately actually growing up was always to go to the Olympics, but didn't happen. I did a bunch of sports. I tried skeleton for a little bit. I did European handball. I used to play on the British national team for baseball. So we were supposed to go in 2012, but they kicked baseball out. So that was supposed to be my free ticket maybe, but
man,
but deep down, I guess that was always my goal to be an Olympian, but it hasn't happened yet.
Well, there's always time. There's always time. I'm waiting for this whole COVID thing to turn into like the Olympics are going to turn into kind of like the scrubs they had in football. You know, like when they brought in like all the B team guys that could never play professional, but they like we're going to throw a team together. I feel like that's going to happen with the Olympics. Something kind of weird. But so that's a really cool story. So we're going to touch on like my audience comes from a lot of different sports, right? And so I I'm always told I'm supposed to niche this thing down, but I just can't because I really find talking to athletes and coaches and scouts and whatnot in other sports, it's really kind of fascinating because we can learn a lot from a lot of times athletes that aren't in our particular sport. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and so I think one of the first things that I find interesting about your story is like you didn't come out of a hotbed to pursue your professional dream. Like in Canada, as everybody probably knows, like hockey is king up here, right? Did you play any hockey?
I played up until I was like 14, but I knew baseball was. I was definitely way better at baseball. Yeah, I was kind of a guy that had a hard slap shot and mediocre skater, but nothing, no WHL aspirations or anything like that. So
Now you're a tall dude too. Like, so you're what, 6'3", 6'2"?
6'3", yep.
Okay, so 6'3", and then you add skates on that, you're 6'6". There's guys who play at that height, but uh, they're like monsters and ridiculously athletic. And so at what point, I guess, in your upbringing, did somebody tell you like, hey, this hockey thing's not going to work out, or did you just know?
Probably just knew. I mean, the first MLB team I talked to was when I was 15, the Angels. There's a scout kind of locally in Western Canada. He kind of was the first prospect card that I ever filled out MLB wise. And I guess that was kind of my first kind of gut feeling that baseball was going to be maybe my ticket. But I grew up, I did play basketball, volleyball, tennis. I did do a whole bunch of different sports. Actually, volleyball for a period there was, University of Calgary has a really good volleyball program.
Yeah.
That was, maybe in the back of my head, but baseball just, yeah, definitely kind of stood out. So
That was your thing.
yeah.
Um, in terms, and I think what's going to happen here for me is I'm going to be jumping ahead and back and head and back because I think what's really important is that so now in your role as an associate scout, you're helping, you're coming at it from the business side of things, right? Like you're coming at it from like you're trying to find kids who have potential, and but also you're going to layer that around your own experience, right? Like so
Yeah.
let me just cut to one of the obvious questions: is do you see a direct correlation between baseball potential and multi-sport background? And you have the total permission to say no.
I mean, I guess from a Sidearm Nation standpoint, though, I do find that the multi-sport athletes, the guys that did do a whole bunch of sports, they can pick up on it quicker. Like a little more adaptive, or just seem to kind of know their body. Like if I was to drop down a pitcher per se,
Mm-hmm.
the baseball only pitchers, they just tend to be maybe a little bit more robotic and maybe less resistance to change. But it's the multi-sport athletes that just, a little more open. Even from a baseball standpoint, you might have been a catcher your whole life, but maybe come college, you get moved to the outfield. But I do find it's the athletes that did a few more sports growing up. They're a little more open, and probably hopefully even just body wise can make that change a little bit easier. But the baseball specific, they end up just maybe being a little more rigid about it, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And I guess what we need to kind of like fill people in on is the niche of sidearm pitching within the world of baseball pitching. Can you explain how that fits in?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Probably, I'm going to say if you watch MLB, probably every team has at least one or two in their bullpen. I know even in college baseball, there's usually one or two in each bullpen. It's kind of one of those things. It's just a unique arm slot. You're messing up the hitter's look. Yeah, pitch like that. I mean, it's something like hitters are trained to face an over the top pitcher. That's what they've been trained to do. Batting practice, coaches are constantly throwing over the top.
Mm-hmm.
So guys, just by dropping down, it can change their career. They can go from being a low end college mop up guy, and then all of a sudden he drops down, and like that guy, the picture that you were showing there, he ends up making the bigs 5 years later when he was probably done his college career. So it just changes things for a lot of guys. So
Is it something? So you said like every team has a couple, right? So is it something where do any kids grow up going like I'm just a sidearm guy, or does everybody start as one type of pitcher and then they kind of niche into this?
I mean, at the end of the day, most guys, it's kind of a last resort. But there are some more, like, maybe I'm obviously more aware of it with Cider Nation, but there is a lot more kids. We've had some 10, 12-year-olds at our camp where their natural arm slot is just a little bit lower. I think a lot of coaches in the past have, that's where they try and get that kid to change his arm slot. And obviously, from a pitching standpoint, there's nothing wrong with it. I think, obviously you don't want to be throwing sidearm from the outfield. That's maybe where a lot of coaches kind of get stuck in their head, like, hey, we need to change this arm slot. But for some youth pitchers, that's just their natural arm slot, and it works from there. So, like I said, at the camps we've had some younger 12, 13-year-olds, and getting to see some of the college pitchers at our camp, and hopefully it gives them some confidence when they go home.
This is so cool. I'm totally flipping through your Instagram here. This is really cool.
There's a lot of weird throwers out there.
So I'm a huge, like, I'm in no matter what the sport, I'm always about kind of the secondary paths into things, right? Like I just I think too many people, they their kids come up in a sport, and if things are going great, it's great, and if things are just a little off center, it's like, oh my god, this is never going to happen. And I'm always one to help athletes kind of find that secondary path, right? Whether it's time, like it's just another opportunity, or it's further down the road, or maybe with my hockey guys, they get cut from one team and now all of a sudden they got to move to Texas or someplace to play. It's like, hey, it can all work out. And what I find really kind of fascinating within pitching or within baseball in general is that you can there's another way to find a way here. Like that's what I think this is really kind of cool. So I'm a big fan of that.
And honestly too, like kind of what I like to preach with a lot of the youth players. I mean, that's where obviously Cider Nation a little more specific for pitching, but just being adaptable and coachable, and whether that's you're not going to be the shortstop anymore in college, just being open. You might be the ninth hitter instead of the fourth hitter, what you're used to growing up. So I mean, you might be a starting pitcher in high school, but then when you go to college, you're going to be a relief pitcher. So you're constantly having to make changes.
So in terms of let's jump ahead and go from the top down and go from that scout / like coach / like, okay, seeing the kids who come through and ultimately have success, right? Because we both know of athletes who finally get to the show, whether that show is baseball or hockey or football or skiing or the Olympics or whatever, and then burn out at that point, or they burn out, and maybe not burnout's not the right word for people, but it's because burnout people think is just it's a fatigue issue. But I'm talking about burnout, like the flame is kind of like gone. They just can't deal with it now. Right. So in your eyes, like when you are now kind of in this scouting role, looking at athletes, what do you look for? What are red flags to you? What are, green flags, if that's even a thing? I just made that up. But like, in your opinion, what helps? Like, what are the things that keep an athlete, and make those dreams happen? And maybe you could share some of your own experience as to actually playing, and then, not necessarily having a lengthy career, but having a career. Let's get into that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a green flag for baseball is just, from a scouting standpoint, is size. Some of that you can't teach, right? Speed,
Right.
As a scout, turning in a guy that's 6'5", 210, and throws 95. I mean, there's really no harm, or even if he ends up having a rough 1 year in the minors, it's an easy sell to my boss, right? But
Right.
it's the Jose Altuves that are 5'7". I mean, the scout that turned him in, I mean, hats off to him. I mean, that's
Right.
I mean, tough to turn into your boss, right? But a lot of it from what I'm learning, even just from a couple guys above me, it's just when you're going to watch a game, they actually, I mean, a lot of them will be college coaches too. They do want to see players. I mean, not to sound bad, they want to see you have a bad game, and how you handle it. That's some adversity. It's easy to go to a game and scout a hitter when he's 4 for 4 with 4 doubles, and it's easy to scout a pitcher when he's throwing a no hitter and everything's going well. But so a lot of it, especially even just some of the high end draft picks, they do actually want to see them have some failure, and how they react to it, how they are with teammates after an error is being made, just little stuff like that. I mean, there's millions and millions of baseball players playing all over the world. And in a way, they're looking for a way to scratch you off and make their life easier. I mean, I think there's a reason why. I mean, there's less and less. They're just trying to get rid of, honestly, some of those clubhouse cancers before even having to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I mean, in the minors, you can maybe hopefully get rid of some of that if you're a higher end prospect. But honestly, for an organization like the Orioles, they're kind of rebuilding right now. They want good character guys, and guys that are going to put in the work in the minors, and not necessarily maybe some of the most talented players, but they are looking for guys that are going to put the work in.
So this is always a conversation that happens across like all sports, right? That idea of like that character guy. But then we always hear stories of the pro who ends up being a bit of a gong show, right? And um and you never can I guess you can never tell when that may happen, right? Like it's so how do those kind of conversations pop up with you guys like professionally?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the off-field stuff too, right? I mean, that's where definitely can be a lot of distractions on the road, or that part of it. Some of that, it's not like you can handcuff the kid and stay in a hotel room the whole time. I mean, I guess maybe now it's a little bit easier to do that, but I mean, yeah, like I said, some of the off-field stuff, it's just trying to. I think I know, and it's not necessarily my end. It's more the guys up above, like cross-checkers. That's their job to kind of maybe delve into just some family, that situation, and honestly talking to coaches, what he's like during practice. One of my biggest things too is it's easy to be coachable when the coach is around watching you, but it's what are you doing when a coach isn't watching you?
Right.
And I think, like I said, some of the guys above me in the Orioles and stuff, they'll do a little more of the research on that and talking to kind of coaches and other coaches that play against them, and just to kind of get a little more of a kind of a character assessment.
But I guess though, like where, and this is probably totally subjective, but where is so I yeah, like right, like
I know, like if a kid's throwing 96, 97,
you're like, we'll deal with that.
you're probably going to get a little more opportunity than a kid throwing 90, 92, unfortunately, even though maybe the 90, 92 kid is definitely maybe a little more of a character guy. But at the same time, I think that's definitely where MLB, I think they are leaning towards drafting more college kids now than high school kids. I think they're, some high school kids, it's kind of worked out, but at the same time, I do think they're starting to realize, a kid needs at least maybe a year or two in college just to kind of maybe grow up a little bit. So there's not too many Mike Trouts that get drafted out of high school and Mike Sorokas that get drafted out of high school and turn out the way they did. So.
Yeah, and part of that is the volume of players that a sport like baseball has, though, right? Like it's there's enough inventory of people to wait, right, and shake out, but still everybody wants to get their hands on that that phenom, right? Like, I mean, everybody's trying to win the lottery. Like it's not, or I should say, not everybody's trying to win the lottery, but if the winning lottery ticket just happened across their desk, they'd be like, yeah, let's do that, right?
Yep.
So, so yeah, I get a kick out of that. In a sport like baseball, like where and you've already touched on this a little bit, like there's geometry, there's mechanics, like there's height and weight. And so, yeah, you get a guy who's 6'3" and they're 200 pounds and they can throw 90 plus. What about for people that might not be so inclined, like, there was that great movie called Major League, right? That came out ages ago. Yeah, right. It's one of my favorite. Actually, I share that movie with lacrosse kids. A whole other story, but there's that scene where Charlie Sheen is like out there with the haircut and and he's got the weird, like he's got the lightning bolt on the side, and he's throwing at this like cutout, and he's taking the head off on the cutout. What goes through? So from your perspective, from a pitcher's perspective, like if a kid can throw heat, but they have no quality of pitch, right? Again, where's that line? How do you go like, okay, we can rein this guy in? Like what, or is it just a crapshoot?
I mean, a little bit of both, right? I mean, that's where it ends up, are you a pitcher or are you a thrower? And I think a lot of throwers end up getting drafted and signed wishing that they can turn them into a pitcher, right? Or that hope that we can turn this guy into a pitcher. But at the end of the day, he's kind of just a thrower. Honestly, a lot of those guys don't have very good off speed. And that's where you kind of look at some of the Caribbean countries like the Dominican Republic. There's a lot of guys on that island that can throw hard, but struggle to make it maybe out of rookie ball in North America because they don't have any off speed, just don't know how to pitch. Gotcha. That's where you look at a guy like Greg Maddux, who had a great Hall of Fame career, but like if you were to watch him pitch in the bigs at like a Division I school, would he get drafted at throwing 84, 85? But at the same time, Greg Maddux got drafted throwing 90, 93 in high school. And then once he got signed, he just learned how to pitch. He kind of said, I can get hitters out 84, 85 and actually be more effective than when I'm 90, 93. And honestly, a guy like Soroka, he pitches better 90, 93, and he could probably get up to 99 if he really wanted to, but he's better off as a pitcher with a little bit less velocity, and he's got 3 good pitches. So yeah, some of that part, it is a bit of a kind of a crapshoot. If a kid if a thrower ends up learning how to pitch, it's tough. And then there's some pitchers that know how to pitch, but they might not ever gain velocity. So it's a fine line.
It's a fine line.
I'm still trying to learn that scouting wise too.
But can you, I mean, are there guys that can, or is it still just a crapshoot for them too?
I mean, that's where kind of hopefully the guys above me in the organization who've been doing it for a lot longer, I'm kind of maybe more on the front line, looking at guys and, hey, take a look at this guy. And then there'll probably be another 2 or 3 guys getting a little bit better opinions. So
it's kind of funneling down. Like is one of the things that happens again in any sport, especially in the high school age, is the idea of like getting recruited and getting seen, right? And my answer to that is always like, being seen is a byproduct of being good, right? That's always what I tell guys. In a sport like baseball, are there kids that go unnoticed? Like, is it possible to fall through the cracks, or is there just so many eyes on all of the available inventory of athletes that if you're good, you're going to get seen, you're going to get noticed?
Yeah, I mean, overall, at the end of the day, if you're getting pretty good hitters out, you're going to get noticed. You might get maybe overlooked as far as the MLB draft, and that's where you might have to go play indie ball. And there's been a bunch of guys that have gone undrafted and ended up having to go play independent baseball for a couple years, kept showing what they were capable of, and got signed out of indie ball. So there's definitely players that get maybe overlooked as far as the MLB draft, but it's not like I'm sure there was teams that knew they were decent. It's just not enough rounds, I guess, to get drafted. So they just have to showcase elsewhere. If they want to continue playing. Some guys, unfortunately, though, if they don't get drafted out of college, I know a bunch of guys that just unfortunately stop stopped playing, and probably should have maybe given it a couple more years in indie ball. But
now, are those indie ball, and I guess, can you define, like, for people that don't know, like, what indie ball is, like, and where would those teams be?
yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of leagues kind of in the States, Atlantic League, Frontier League, American Association, Pioneer League, there's a bunch all over
Okay.
North America. And it's just, you're not affiliated with an MLB team. So if you have a good year, you're a free agent, you can talk to all 30 teams, and you're open to sign with anyone. But if you get drafted with an MLB organization, you kind of have to climb the ranks in their system. But if you're an indie ball, and depending on what league you're in, the Atlantic League, it's a lot of former big leaguers. It's kind of considered, double A, triple A. And if you have a good year there, I mean, you can kind of go straight to triple A with an MLB team if you're doing well.
And how about the network of baseball, in terms of, when a guy goes to, let's say it's the Atlantic League, and they're let's say, are those guys looking for more time to get noticed, or more time to develop, or both?
I mean, probably a league like the Atlantic League, it's just to get noticed. Maybe like a Pioneer League, it's just maybe kind of a rookie ball A league, indie league, that maybe time to just maybe 1 or 2 more years to develop after college. But the Atlantic League, just like I said, it's got a bunch of former big leaguers. It's kind of just showcase, and you're ready to sign. So,
Gotcha. So, baseball, what's the lifespan? Well, I know the answer to this. So for people that don't know the answer, but, like, what's the lifespan? Well, yeah. Well, yeah. Right. Like, that's the problem. Like, we've got such a I've got hockey parents, I got football guys, I got ski guys, I got equestrian parents. Like we're all over the map here. But that's what I kind of like about this, because there are some common threads, but there are also some inspirational pieces, right, that come from every sport. When I was a young athlete, and I was involved in the sport of luge, like, this is ages ago, the idea was like, oh, if you haven't really made it by the time you're like 18 or 19, you should probably just give it up. But then the lifespan just expanded. And so, in a sport like baseball, especially for pitching, what's the lifespan of a pitcher?
I mean, that's where, hopefully, as long as you're healthy, though. I mean, there's guys that, I mean, like, supposedly kind of, even in, like, obviously the bigs, if they're given enough time, a lot of guys don't really become decent pitchers till they're 28, 29, just as far as getting a feel for their pitches, and, locating, and probably confidence too. So it's not like, that's where, unfortunately, like Dominican Republic, they almost, if they don't sign at 17, they're kind of, they're done, right? Like, and whereas in North America, there's a lot more opportunity to kind of keep playing. So as long as you're healthy, that's the tricky thing. Basically, throwing a baseball, it's actually, it's unnatural. Like, your arm's designed to throw underhand. So anything you do overhand, your shoulders, it's not designed to do that. So,
Right. And it's a whole, for people that don't understand, like, there's a whole industry of strength and conditioning coaches that specialize in just pitchers, right? Like,
yeah.
I know Eric Cressy, who was from Boston, who's down in Florida. I know Eric really well, and his work, and I know he was one of those guys. He's been around for, I mean, he has like a physio background, right? I think he was, for a long time. So, the reason why I wanted to just kind of touch on that is because I think in every sport, there's this panic, especially in North America, there's this panic to get seen by a certain time. And, like, I share the story, like, growing up in Boston, I played hockey in Boston, and it was common for kids to go through high school, go to college, and then go play pro. When I came to Canada, and you'd heard about, hey, if you're not playing, at such and such a level by the time you're 14, you should just give it up. And I hate that. Right. I really, because you give up all this time to mentally, physically, and emotionally mature. Have you yet seen, like, what are the sweet spots there for the guy that makes it to the big leagues and sticks? Like, what's the sweet spot? And then what do you see on the fringes?
I mean, obviously, from a Canadian standpoint, I mean, we're so far behind as far as just baseball. I don't know if there's a timeline per se. I think a lot of, like, even just high school kids, they're not even playing enough baseball. So
Yeah, but because a lot of Canadians, I mean, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a fair bit of Canadians who go play pro baseball.
yep, yep,
Right. And so like one of a common thing across all sports is this idea of like, volume, right? Like, and so a Canadian pitcher doesn't have nearly the volume of pitches that an American kid would have at the same age, I would imagine.
yeah, and that's the tricky thing. I know definitely in the States they got to be careful of just the travel teams, right? I mean, there's some programs and places. Obviously, you can't with the weather, but they're almost doing tournaments every weekend, and their arm is definitely
Toast.
doing a little more work than possibly a Canadian kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a reason why there hasn't been many. I don't even know if there's been any Little League World Series 12-year-olds that pitched in the World Series that have pitched in the bigs. And maybe I'm wrong about that. That's just something I was told. There's been some hitters. There's been definitely been some hitters,
Yeah.
but I don't know if there's been like any pitchers. But
Pitchers.
I mean, that's something I may have to double check. But
I
definitely
think
not as many. Just as far as like you see a lot of those the 12U, they're good, big, strong at that age, and they end up almost just kind of probably pitching too much.
right. Or they're just early adopters that spike at that age, but then
True,
have no creativity or longevity or any of that stuff, right?
true.
So then, what do you see? Because I think one of the problems, because we see this in like, especially in like soccer and baseball, the not so much in like football, but it's a thing in football too. But this idea of like, all right, you get a young kid who's like 14, right? Let's say they're just about to go into high school, and and they're above average in physical ability, height, weight, whatever. They can throw harder than their peers, maybe not necessarily with any sort of quality, but they're above average mostly because of their size and their geometry. um but then they get sucked in that fear of missing out, like, oh my god, here's a travel team, here's the thing. And if you don't go, like, they feel like all their opportunities are going to be like cut from them, right? There's going to get some low level travel team or some regional thing that's going to shut them out, and mom or dad think, oh my god, this is never going to work, right? So do you have any advice for that kid?
You know what? I definitely see it where a lot of kids, parents, kind of have that Division One stuck in their head. But at the same time, there's other levels. There's Division Two, Division Three, junior college, NAIA. That lots of players have made it out of those levels too. I mean, I played Division Two. We were a pretty high end Division Two program. I could have gone Division One out of junior college, but actually had a better offer at Div 2 and was going to kind of come in and be the number one or two guy. Whereas if I went Division 1, I was going to maybe be a bullpen guy and maybe not throw as much. So I chose to go Div 2. And I do think a lot of parents and players just have that Division 1 kind of stuck in their head. But I think you can go elsewhere. You can go to maybe an NAIA in Kansas and be the starting guy for all 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
hopefully go play in a pretty high-end college summer league and just keep showing that you can get some of those Division One hitters out too.
would you say that the attitude in baseball is to go pro? And what I mean by that is like, it's like, that's the dream. It's not like, hey, I'm going to go to college and play D1, and then maybe it's like, we're like, because as someone, like, I mean, I played like little league when I was really, really young, in Massachusetts, like ages ago, right? But I still remember, like, the idea was like, if this dream works out, you're going to play in the bigs, right? You're going to play in the bigs. So, but because some other sports aren't like that, would you agree, or how would you describe that?
I mean, probably obviously not as much in Canada. I mean, that was definitely my dream.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of kids, even just locally, a good goal is make the junior national team. But I mean, obviously, definitely not compared to the States. I think for a lot of guys in Canada, a good goal for them is just to play college baseball and go from there. I don't, and that's even just from some of the coaching I've seen. I don't see the same maybe drive per se as far as that pro baseball dream as maybe guys in the States.
Would you say, because you said that your dream was to play professionally?
Yeah.
Do you remember when that dream kind of kicked in for you? At what age?
It was funny. I was actually talking about that a couple of days ago. Like it was like in grade 4. Actually, I
Wow.
remember writing, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said I wanted to play pro baseball, and my teacher laughed at me. And but in a weird way, like I kind of glad, like I remember it. I wish I would have play MLB baseball and maybe being a little more specific, because I did play pro baseball. I didn't play MLB baseball.
Right, right. Well, you got to be careful about that, right?
Yeah.
Well, but I think, I part of my mental performance program, I have this theory just of goals plus one, right? So if I meet an athlete and I say, okay, what are your goals? And then they spill it out and they're like, okay, this is my goal. I'm like, all right, great. What would happen if you just plus one to all that? What would that be? And then what ends up happening is, like, mentally your mind goes, it starts to see that stuff, right? And because I think what happens is that when you have that higher tier goal, when you give yourself permission to have that higher tier goal, that all of the decision points become a little bit easier. Like, because a lot of athletes, as like a lot of athletes, like if they're like, oh, I just want to play college, then playing college is a struggle. Where for that athlete that's like, I want to play pro, they get through that college dream. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I hear you there. And I always was pretty good about, I mean, obviously I had that pro dream, but just kind of setting kind of smaller, realistic goals in between. I think a lot of athletes maybe, I mean, it's good to kind of think big, but almost just think big without maybe, trying to skip some smaller steps in between, right? Like my goal is always to make Team Alberta, junior national team first, college, whereas if you're, 15, I'm just going to go play pro. I mean, there's smaller steps to that. I think I've just noticed too that even with the UFC, there were some guys that maybe just had unfortunately, some unrealistic goals without maybe assessing themselves, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is that. Like, there is definitely the the flighty vision that has cracks in the foundation. I guess the way I kind of look at it is, goes, sometimes you get those athletes where they, they've kind of capped their potential, right? And then time goes by, or they have somebody in their life who's capped their potential, like, whether it's you in fourth grade, or it's a parent going like, hey, well, maybe you should just kind of tone it down a little bit, but that kid's like, no, I want to work, I want to make this happen, right? Do you kind of, in a scouting role, when you meet athletes now and you talk to them, let's say you see a guy who's really talented and you talk to them, but the way they do you ever run into guys that the way they talk about themselves is kind of down here? Do you ever worry about them like that? Like they're not thinking big enough?
That's a very good point. Yeah, maybe just not as much confidence as maybe needed. Some of that I know definitely players. I was maybe one of them too. Like I definitely had that confidence on the mound. It's kind of my time to shine. But then sometimes maybe off the mound, I didn't necessarily have as much confidence as looking back at it, just maybe trying to compare myself always on the team. Or I remember even on the junior national team, always trying to look at, that guy's throwing this hard, that guy's throwing this hard. And not necessarily realizing, well, I'm here for a reason, but just maybe always trying to compare myself to teammates too. Probably I had a bad habit of that, but definitely, hopefully though, once they're on the mound though, I mean, myself, I pitched like I was 6'10". I was Randy Johnson, even though I definitely wasn't, but I was missing.
You're killing pigeons and making it happen.
But I just kind of had that confidence on the mound, but hopefully to get to that next level though, they're gonna I mean, you definitely need that confidence. I don't think that it's not gonna happen if you don't believe in yourself.
Mm-hmm. In terms of scouting and funneling athletes to kind of into that pro pipeline, uh, you being in Western Canada, at what point do you uh, at what point do you kind of earmark a kid and go, hey, wow, all right, cool?
Um, yeah, I mean, give or take. I mean, kind of high school. That's kind of the spot. I mean, grade 11 is kind of an age to kind of start tracking kids a little bit more, especially in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
We don't necessarily have. I mean, we do have the travel ball still, but it's yeah. I guess kind of the age is kind of I guess grade 11.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of maybe start just keeping track on a little bit.
And then you guys have scouts that are dedicated purely to like the college ages, right?
I mean, give or take, like, well, everyone's kind of responsible for their own area. So,
Okay.
so, I'm kind of Western Canada, high school and college,
Yep.
uh, and then with Sidearm Nation, actually indie ball.
Yeah.
I'll follow some sidearm pitchers for the Orioles just to kind of see how they're doing in professional indie ball.
Yeah. I mean, and that's one thing that's really cool about Sidearm Nation is like that's such a cool niche to be a part of. How many pitchers, like if you put a number on North American sidearm pitchers, how many kids are we talking about here?
Um, I'm gonna say maybe around 10,000.
Yeah.
Give or
Okay.
take, around there. Like I said, kind of every high school team, college probably has at least one. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe 10, 15,000, give or
Yeah, yeah,
take.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool. Um, this with COVID, right? With COVID going on, what's the talk professionally about the impact of COVID on professional athlete? Like on like are you going to be losing a couple of years a kid? Like what's the talk like?
Yeah, I mean, I know even I'm sure from a college recruiting angle, it's been maybe a little bit tricky. Just with guys almost kind of backlogged, coming back for another year. From that standpoint, talking to some college coaches, it's been a little
Yeah.
bit of a kind of interesting kind of mix, and probably from a recruiting, it's made it interesting.
Yeah.
It was going to happen regardless in the minors, but they have cut two levels. So there's four systems in the minors now instead of six.
Mm.
Like I said, it was going to happen regardless. Just to kind of help the minor league pay. It's not very good.
No.
It's baseball it's one of those sports where it's not like minor league hockey, and you can still make a good living playing professional hockey. Baseball, unless you've got a big signing bonus, it's yeah, you're not making much in the minors. It's not as
I
but
saw a game. I was in upstate New York like 4 summers ago, and we drove over to Burlington, Vermont to see a minor league game, and I can't remember the name of the team right now. But I mean, Burlington loves their minor league baseball, so it was like a really cool deal. It was a packed stadium. I mean, it was good food. There were mascots. There was it was fun. But I can imagine in other parts of the country, like it's just not. There's just not enough. There's not enough dollars flowing to maintain that. Is that kind of where that ends up? Like,
yeah, I mean, I know too, like the draft has changed too. Like now there's gonna only be 20 rounds. And like I said, some of that was gonna happen. Yeah, I mean, it was going to kind of happen anyway. There used to be like 70, and then it went down to 50. Now there's only 20. So they're definitely really making sure like a guy has to be ready to play pro ball,
mm-hmm.
um, and hopefully helping with the minor league conditions and guys getting paid more. That's kind of some of the elimination of some of those rounds. So I think COVID definitely sped that up.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of gave him a year to kind of reevaluate. I mean, that was kind of in the talks to happen in the next couple of years, but I think COVID definitely sped that up a little bit. But good and bad. I know some people are upset that there's less opportunity for guys to play affiliated ball, but there's going to be more opportunities for players to play independent baseball and showcase what they can do.
And let's just talk about that again because because I'm always a big fan of that secondary path. Like I got a lot of trust and belief in guys that, aren't necessarily the cream of the crop at the time they get drafted, right? And but if they can hang on a little bit, right, they usually end up becoming better, like better prospects, right? Like, is it fair to say that just the more time, and maturity that an athlete has, like when they finally get that opportunity, it should stick better?
Yeah, no, that'd be fair to say. And I think, baseball, it is one of those sports. It is a game of failure, and just that mental grind of it is just learning how to get through that. It can take a long time, and I know guys that still struggle with that. And if you're a good hitter, you're failing 70% of the time, and just that part of it, a lot of guys, whether they get that or not, it can take a while to get that through. You're not going to be the 500 hitter anymore in high school, even once you get to college and facing better pitchers. And it's just going to get harder and harder the higher levels you play. So
I don't know if you saw this at the Super Bowl, they posted this graphic of the Buccaneers and the Chiefs of their 5-star, 4-star, 3-star athlete, like their recruits. Did you see that?
no.
So Tampa Bay had one 5-star recruit on their roster for the Super Bowl, and Kansas City had none. And then I think for 2 stars they had it was like 12 and 9 or something, and then it was like 3 stars was like, and then no stars was like Tampa Bay had like 22 no-star recruits on their team, close to half their roster. And I think for Kansas City, it was still like in the high teens. And why do you think that even when we know that, like, that, I know that, like that, even though you're not the 5-star recruit coming out of high school, you almost have more, it almost feels like you have more potential to make it than the kid who is the 5-star, right? Why as a culture, do people not understand that?
It's a good question. And it's tough too. Like, you can look at the Dodgers just signing Trevor Bauer for $40 million, and I definitely don't think he's worth that much. I don't think anyone's worth that much, honestly. Like, I mean, it's scary when you do the math on it. I think he's going to be making like 14,000 American a pitch. You can walk one and make 56,000 on 4.
Wow. Walk him. Nice job.
I mean, I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Obviously, just that, I don't know, the way it's being marketed almost like, but I know definitely from a hockey standpoint, though, that's definitely where I think in Canada, like that whole, the WHL, and if you haven't got drafted in the Bantam draft, I think a lot of kids almost have it in their head that their hockey career is over, but it definitely isn't. Hopefully that should make them work even harder. And I know guys that have made the NHL that didn't get drafted WHL and kept plugging away. But yeah, I don't know. It's almost like maybe that's just kind of what they've been hearing growing up from their coaches, and if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world. There's still other ways to get there.
Mm-hmm.
From a baseball standpoint in Canada, though, I don't think that's the case. There's not. I think guys are just happy to push guys and just let's get you to college, and then once you get to college, sky's the limit. So hopefully,
see where it goes.
Yeah.
For the because you talked about kind of indie ball, and as a way for guys to kind of still, okay, if you don't get drafted, like, it's still an opportunity there. How does an athlete like that, for people that don't understand, like, how does an athlete like that actually, live and play? Because they're not getting money, right? They're at that level. They're not making any money.
You get paid. It's just not. It's not that much. I mean, it's
like what for people that don't know, what's not much.
The highest I made playing indie ball was 1,200 American a month.
Okay, so like $400 a week. And are you getting put up? Like, you're getting billeted? Like, what's going on?
Not where I was at. I know some teams will help you out with that, but you're on your own finding rent and that part of it. I know horror stories of 8 guys staying in one, just pull out couches, blow up, right? Like whatever, just to kind of make ends meet. And you get help food wise, like, meals after a game, before a game. But I mean, it's definitely not as much help as I think there should be.
Sure.
Obviously, that's where guys can still make a decent living playing overseas. The most I made, I made more money going to Australia and Colombia, just to kind of supplement what I was making in the summer, but ultimately just trying to showcase my abilities elsewhere.
Did you ever feel that like the living conditions, the training conditions were not enough to help you improve? Right. I mean, now that you and I are a little bit older in our life, we can look back on those times and go like, yeah, we did some stupid shit when we were kids. Right. Like, but sometimes you can be in an environment where no matter how much work you're putting in, you just still don't have the opportunity to really develop. Right. Or would you just say like that any athlete in any place could really make that work?
I mean, minor league baseball, I mean, at least definitely at the indie ball level, like you're not eating well.
Right.
You're eating McDonald's, Subway, pizza after the game,
Taco Bell,
leftover hot dogs from the stand, whatever the word sold. And from that standpoint, looking back at it, as a professional athlete, like definitely not eating what I probably should have been eating.
yeah.
And that's where too, sometimes I wish I would have given it maybe a couple more years. But honestly, it was kind of financial, and just kind of saw that, writing on the wall, time to move on and make money elsewhere. But if I was able to make a little bit more money, it would have been nice to maybe give it a couple more years and just still maybe showcase. And yeah, especially inside our nation, like I kind of dropped down and my first year of indie ball and had some success with it. And I was still kind of, after 3 years, still kind of getting some looks from some teams, but at the same time, I was also kind of getting tired of maybe getting, the same run around a little bit, and like, hey, we'll follow you another year. So I maybe just kind of a combination of the amount of money I was making and time to move on.
I always say that values and performance collide. Right. And that happens on the way up. It also happens on the way out, that at some point values and performance collide. Ultimately, in a professional sport, performance is everything. Right. And I think I wanted to just kind of maybe finish on this topic a little bit. I tell all my athletes, really regardless of age, that the sooner you can get more serious about your sport, the sooner you can dial in this idea that you are looking for results and you're trying to get to a certain result, and it's not necessarily fun. Like I feel like the word fun has ruined a lot of youth athletes. Sometimes athletes that have never gone pro or whatever, but the idea of like chasing fun versus chasing enjoyment, that's different to me. But can you talk about maybe, when you work with young athletes and you go, like, would you agree that for a lot of those guys, that, hey, the sooner they can dial it in and get serious about their body, their habits, like, if anything, the sooner they're going to know that they're not going to make it, right? If they have that all dialed in and it's not working, it's like you can quit early as opposed to dragging it on. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's where it's tough, because it was always a dream of mine to play pro baseball, and then almost as soon as I played pro, that fun part of it kind of gets sucked out a little bit, if that makes sense. Like, it's still fun, obviously, getting paid to play a kid's game at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also that pressure on performance, and knowing that I could have one bad outing and I could get released. It's not the most comforting feeling to always have that behind your back. At least in college and high school, if you have a bad outing, hey, go back out there. But definitely in pro ball, like, it's a revolving door, and there's always guys looking at taking your spot, and it does kind of suck the life and fun out of it a little bit. And that's where I'll see it all the time too. Like I know even when I went back, and the odd time I'll still play a little men's league here and there, but it's kind of fun again to just hop on the mound and not worry about getting cut or released anymore. As long as my body, though, that's a different story. But
Right. You need like 12 days rest, right? Like to no, I hear you. Yeah, because that performance piece that you noticed, that all of a sudden when you got to that pro level and now all of a sudden it feels like that pressure's on. One thing that I encourage my athletes to understand is, like, if you can pile that pressure on yourself a little bit, not when you're younger, so that by the time you get there, it's like, hey, I've been here before. Like, I've been in this situation before, because it can catch a lot of guys like totally off guard. They finally get to that level and it's like, wait a second, holy smokes. Right. That's the, you get the jersey and the pants and the socks and the clean cleats, and you're like, dang, right? And you're like, what? Right. And then you're like, oh, we got a revolving door. And so sometimes you have to manufacture that, a little bit when you're young. I've seen this happen in every sport where athletes have, come out at junior ranks and been the prodigy. And then all of a sudden they get to their first Olympic trials or their first real tryout and it doesn't go well. And then they're just like, whew. Like, we're not talking like they just kind of fizzle. It's like it's like they've jumped off a cliff, right? So that performance piece is critical. And I guess as a scout, like, you've got to have some experience now, or where you've seen guys that, hey, on paper, this is the guy, and then all of a sudden something like that happens and they're just done like a light switch.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily from an Orioles standpoint yet. Hopefully not the case. I know there was minor league baseball, obviously, last year. I guess still kind of new. Only been with them for a year and a half, so hopefully not quite yet. I've definitely seen that just with players personally, though, that I've played with. Yeah, like this guy's going to be the next, guy to make it out of Alberta or even honestly Western Canada, and it just wasn't in the cards for him. And I don't know if that was pressure maybe, or
yeah, I was going to ask, like, do you see any commonalities yet? Like, do you in your not necessarily as a scout, but just in your own experience, having gone through what you've gone through, do you see any experience, any commonalities that are little red flags to you?
And even just some of the youth kids that I've coached that were pretty good, 12, 13, 14, and maybe I got to be careful how I word this, though, but like, definitely parents have to be careful. And that's where sometimes you start to see, is it really the kid that wants this, or is it the parent that wants this? And you can kind of start to maybe notice, maybe even once some of the kids, when I was coaching them in 12U, once they get to kind of high school, you can definitely tell that they weren't that serious about baseball. And it was,
even though they were talented, not necessarily as serious.
A lot of the talent, and that's where you got to be careful too. I think, I see a lot of dads, good and bad, pushing your kid. I mean, like I said, some kids need that, some kids don't. But I've definitely seen some group of parents that maybe push their kid too much, and their kid probably didn't want it. So
what's the difference to you? Like, what's the difference between pushing a kid and just giving them opportunities, right? Like there's always another travel team, there's always another camp or clinic to go to. What's the difference? And do you ever actually really see it, or just, is it just come out in the wash later?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Definitely from what I've seen, it does kind of come out later on. Maybe that's where the kid might get a little more aware, like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's where too, though. I mean, even just some of the kids that maybe ended up kind of dropping out of baseball. I know, a couple kids ended up becoming good at other sports, and that's where maybe, we talked about it before, maybe that kind of being open and adaptable, not just in baseball, but even just sports in general. So hopefully though, that's where some of that is just going to be some awareness on the kid and knowing like what your passion is. I mean, if you're not enjoying going to practice, I mean, I know some kids obviously want to play the games. I get it. But if you're not enjoying the practice part of it, or, even just some of the small tedious drills, which I get it, baseball can definitely be tedious at times.
Yep.
But, and I get it too. Like some of the drills, I remember maybe half doing them at times. I wish I would have maybe done more of them at home, some of the strength stuff at home. But I definitely think kids have a big opportunity nowadays, though. The lifting part I'm jealous of, though. I think that's definitely something, I could have made a big difference in my career. Like I didn't start lifting until I was a freshman in college, and I didn't even really know what weights were as much in high school. I wish I did, but
yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of that combination where I do think kids need to kind of hopefully get a little more self-aware where they stand too. But am I enjoying this? Is this worthwhile? Am I enjoying going to practice? And if you're not enjoying going to practice, it's probably not the right sport for you.
Geoff, listen, it's top of the hour here. Like on any of these calls, we can just go forever, right? So let's finish up a little bit here with first. Where can everybody get a hold of you, that sort of thing, and what's give us all your little details like that.
Yeah, Sidearm Nation, I guess, kind of on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Just kind of started my own podcast. I guess launched it kind of beginning of 2021. Kind of released a video ebook for sidearm submarine pitchers. Kind of something that's kind of been in the works for a couple years, but once I became the head coach of the University of Calgary, I struggled a little bit with that balance with Sidearm Nation, trying to almost do 2 full-time things and just wasn't quite working. So it's kind of been fun to even myself with the podcast to get some, current former big leaguers on it. And, and kind of just being a kind of fun new challenge for me as well, kind of get out of my comfort zone and do some new stuff. So it's been fun.
And you're on Spotify and iTunes and all that stuff. So love it. Zan Barksdale?
Yep. Catcher.
Yeah. Trying to get in touch with him he's a pain in the ass to book a time with, right? So I'm like, whatever, Zan, you call me later. But you guys should get together. Be good mix up there. Geoff, listen, man, really appreciate it. Thanks so much. We're freezing cold up here. We're out of the worst of it, but it's nice talking to I love talking to guys that come out of like non-hotbeds, make things happen. Because I think as coaches and now as a scout and things like that, you got an interesting perspective, right, on how it all happens, right? It's not like you're coming out of California or Florida or whatever. It's easy, it has its own problems, but whatever. We'll talk about that later. But no, I really appreciate you taking the time for me. As always, for everybody, check out sidearmnation.com. If you got a baseball player in your life, check it out and connect with Geoff here. Yeah, thanks again, man. Really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. Take care.